Everyone, my name is Rody van Grieken. I'm also known as Fueled by Passion on the Hardcore NHL Fans Facebook page. I'm here today with Zachary Anderson. He's the Flyers admin for that very same page. He's also known as Toothless Grin, and today we're going to talk a little Flyers with him. It's also his introduction interview, so we'll get to know Zach a little better. So, Zach, thanks for joining me today. How are you doing?
Good. How about yourself?
I'm pretty good, thank you. So, as I mentioned, we're going to talk some Flyers hockey today. So, I want to start with what happened last season. The Flyers missed the playoffs by a lot of points, I would say. What do what do you think of that season?
Uh, I feel that it was I don't know, kind of expected. I mean, no, I wasn't expecting them to make. If they did make the playoffs, I wasn't expecting a run or anything. I was expecting, first round exit like last year. Just because the roster was pretty much identical. Um, really nothing changed. Yeah, Burby was still there. I mean, it was just it just didn't feel like anything was going to change this year from last year.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't expect them to lose by to not make it by this
Yeah.
as much as they missed it. But I wasn't expecting I guess a overly successful season. So
All right. Were there any bright spots, as they say, for the Flyers this season?
well, obviously Jake Voracek
Yeah.
emerging out. Um, I mean, he had a phenomenal year. Uh, and kind of dropped off at the end of the year though, which was a little disappointing. But he's still ranked in the top 10 in scoring, and you can't really complain about that. Now, I guess the challenge is just going to be keeping him to re-signing him and still staying under the cap for not this year but next year because he's a pending UFA on the season coming up. So
All right. So you do have some fear about losing him.
uh, I don't think the Flyers would let him go, and I think he would want to stay.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, in a salary cap world, you never know. I mean, things happen all the time that you just look at and you're like, how did that happen, or why did they do that? But it still happens.
Yeah. Sure. So, I also want to talk about the Hartnell Umberger trade. It's been almost a year now since that deal was made. The Philadelphia Flyers, and correct me if I'm wrong, the Philadelphia Flyers sent Scott Hartnell to the Columbus Blue Jackets in exchange for RJ Umberger and the fourth round pick in the upcoming draft. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
All right. So, how do you feel about that deal so far?
I mean, it is what it is. It wasn't a talent trade. It wasn't a trade where we thought, oh, Umberger's going to make us better, where Hartnell didn't. It literally was a purely financial move because Umberger and Hartnell have pretty much identical contracts, except for Umberger's is a year shorter.
Mm-hmm.
So it was literally just about getting the money off the books a year sooner rather than, having it for an extra year to make room for, re-signing players like Jake Voracek coming up, Braden Shen, Sean Couturier. Their contracts are going to be expiring soon. So, it's
Mm-hmm.
about keeping all the young people if you can, as many of them as you can.
Yeah. All right. So, uh,
So
so it was more focused on money than on the talent, you say.
right, and Hartnell's a Philly fan favorite, so it's not like he was ever gonna. Umber could have had an excellent season, and people would have still been like, we still wanted Hartnell here. So,
Yeah.
I mean, most Flyers fans get the financial aspect of it, but at the same time, there was that emotional attachment to Scott Hartnell. That is, I mean, I'm not gonna say unprecedented here in Philadelphia, but it was a he was definitely a fan favorite. Like if he would probably rival with Drew on the favorites on the team at
Mm-hmm.
when he was here. So
Yeah. All right. So another player I wanted to talk about was Michael Del Zotto was signed as a free agent last off season. He had a lot of trouble finding an NHL team, but the Flyers eventually signed him as soon as it was known that Kimmo Timonen wouldn't be playing the major part of the season. How have you been feeling about his game so far as a Flyer?
uh, he he kind of had a rough start, very inconsistent All-Star. He really found his consistency after, like, I think it was either right before the All-Star. I think it was right before the All-Star break. Excuse me. And
Yeah.
then, but um, I'm not, I'm not 100% sold on him. I mean, I like him as a player. And for when he's on, I mean, he's great. You know, he had a couple of game-winning goals. I think he was in the top, you know, echelon of defenders in game-winning goals this year. Um, but it wasn't. But at the same time, you look at the size of him, and then you look at the other defensemen on the roster, which is Mark Streit, Andrew McDonald, Nick Schultz. These aren't overly large people. So if you keep him, and obviously you're going to probably have to trade Luke Shen or Nick Grossman, which is rumored to happen anyways,
Hmm.
then you have an extremely small blue line. And teams like Anaheim, granted, we only see them twice a year, but teams with the bigger forwards are just going to push you around the whole time. So, and I don't, obviously, that's a concern for me. But
Yeah.
so, I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is I wouldn't be upset if we kept him, and I wouldn't be upset if he left. I mean, I wouldn't, it's kind of one of those things where it's like, okay, he's good, but there's a pro and a con for each. So
Yeah.
it's just kind of, you know.
Indeed. So if you had to pick, if you were Ron Hextall, would you pick Del Zotto over a guy like Grossman or Shen, just like you mentioned?
Well, yeah, well, either one, they're going to get, one of them's getting traded no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
The Flyers just picked up that KHL guy, Medvedev
Yeah.
from Russia,
Yeah.
Russian Olympian. He has a lot of experience.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't have experience on the North American ice, though.
Indeed.
But so even right now, without Del Zotto, we have 8 D-man signed
That's a
on
lot.
on one-way contracts, right?
Yeah.
Right. So even if Del Zotto walks, which I don't think he will, I think they'll end up getting something done,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But even if he does walk, Grossman or Shen, if not both, they're still going to get traded. So it's not going to be I feel like, or maybe fingers crossed they can find a way to get rid of McDonald, but I don't see that happening. But
Mm-hmm.
we'll see.
Indeed. You mentioned McDonald. I believe he has 4.7 million a year on his contract. For
So I think it's a little more than that actually.
more than that.
I think. Hold on. I actually have the thing up right here. I could have swore he was around 5.
Wow, that's a lot. Would you, do you think if any if none of those or if McDonald won't be traded, which is very likely, do you think the Flyers will just send him to Lehigh Valley, the AHL affiliate, in order to get a guy like Gostisbehere here up, who is a fairly highly touted prospect of the Flyers?
No, because that still holds the cap issue, and
Yeah,
I just checked his contract's $5 million a year.
that's a lot.
Yeah, but no, because if you send him down, then it's like that Mike Richards thing where you only get what I think it's like $900,000 off the cap, and you still have the rest put on because they're only on one-way contracts.
Yeah.
So, I think uh, I don't think they would send him down. I think they would maybe try to work with him if they can't move him, which I don't think they would be able to, or I think it'll be very hard to.
Yeah.
But I think they would obviously keep him up, maybe even healthy scratch him. I mean, he was a healthy scratch for a few games last season, so it wouldn't surprise me.
Indeed. And as I mentioned, Gostisbehere here, the Flyers have some pretty good defensive prospects in Samuel Orin, who was a first rounder in 2013. He won the QMJHL title with Rimouski. They also have 2014 first rounder Travis Sanheim from the Calgary Hitmen, and Robert Hack, who was a second rounder in 2013 too, and Gostisbehere here, of course. Who are you the most excited about of those 4?
Gostisbehere for sure. Um, he's very smooth skating.
Mm-hmm.
He's very fast. He moves the puck well.
Yeah.
The only downfall again like I mentioned before, is his size. He's like 5'11", 180 something.
Yeah.
So he doesn't bring a lot of size to the table, which again concerns me
Hmm.
because I mean, if you have a if if all your D men are under 6 foot tall, I don't
That's
know what you're gonna do. So um, I think that he has the best chance of making it out of camp this year,
yeah.
but I don't think any fly, as I mentioned though, with the logjam of D men, I don't think any of the prospects will make it on the big team right out of camp.
Indeed. Yeah. So as we were talking about prospects, let's move on to the entry draft. The Flyers have the seventh overall pick in this draft. They also own the Tampa Bay Lightning's pick, which the number of the selection has yet to be decided, as the Lightning are still in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Obviously, they're playing the Blackhawks in the finals, uh, with Game One getting off tonight. But about that seventh overall pick, what do you think the Flyers will target?
I think they'll try to get Lawson or get Kraus. I
Yeah.
think they'll try to get him.
Mm-hmm.
If he's not there, um, I've heard Rantanen is a big target. I've heard
Yeah.
Mears is a big target. I've heard a whole bunch of different people
Mm-hmm.
um, that are targets for them to get, but it all depends on who falls to them
Yeah.
at that point. Because really, it doesn't matter what player you get at number 7 because they're all going to be good.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so I'm not too worried.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't. I think, and it's hard to say this, and I don't know how I would feel, but if Provorov is right there at 7
Mm-hmm.
and he's not picked earlier, I you never can have too much D depth, but at the same time, I don't know how he would fit into the Flyers, overall plan.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know what they would do with him, so
Mm-hmm.
I could see them even maybe going for a center, and depending who's there again, and maybe trying to move Scott Lawton if need be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if they need the room, which I don't think they do, I think they'll be fine with as long as they pick a forward. I think they'll be fine.
All right. And also that other first round pick they have of the Lightning, as I mentioned, what do you think they will do with that pick? Will they move up or move down with that pick, or move it for a roster player, or do you think they'll select with that pick?
Um, I don't think they'll move up or down with it. They have 7 picks in the first 4 rounds.
That's a lot.
So, yeah, I don't. They have 2 in the first, 1 in the second, 2 in the third, and 2 in the fourth. So,
Yeah.
I don't think they're gonna move. If they move the pick, I think it's gonna be to get rid of a player that has a bad contract on the Flyers, like a Vinny or an Umberger, maybe a McDonald, like we mentioned,
Yeah.
um, who who has a big contract, and kind of throw that into the deal, and then get some. Obviously, they would get some player back, but it wouldn't be as much as if you just threw in a first round pick. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that I could see them trying to use that pick to help move a contract that obviously they don't want anymore, especially with trying to re-sign Jake Voracek and, like I mentioned, all the young players that need to be re-signed as well.
Indeed. So you mentioned the prospects.
Wings that need to be filled. So I think that should be a priority.
Mm-hmm. All right.
So
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What about a goaltending prospect? There are some good prospects in this draft, not outstanding, and they're not expected to go in the first round, but still projected to become NHL starters eventually. Do you think a guy like Samsonov from the KHL, or what's his name, Mackenzie Blackwood from the Barrie Colts, would be a possible target?
Uh, I mean, it could be. I wouldn't think in the first round. I think they would, just because the track record for picking goalies in the first round, especially early in the first round, is not good. I mean, Rick DiPietro, kind of sticks out in your mind when you think of that, of a goalie
Yeah,
that was picked really early.
indeed.
But I mean, if there's one sitting there in the second or third round that they want, then sure, because we do have a very weak goalie system. because I think we're letting Rob Zepp walk.
Yeah.
So he's not going to be there. Ray Emery, I think, will walk, so he's not going to be there. So right now we don't have an AHL star. I mean, we have Anthony Stolars
Yeah.
who played for the London Knights, but at best he's going to be an AHL starter this year.
Yeah.
At best.
Mm-hmm.
So we still need to fill in the other holes there. The NHL backup, the AHL backup. So I could see them picking a goalie in the second or third round if there's one available there.
Yeah. All right. And so I want to go on to the off season, as you mentioned already. Rob Sapp and Emery. You don't expect those guys back. Who do you see the Flyers targeting for a backup goalie in the free agency market?
I don't know who's even available for backup goalie in the free agency market right now. I don't think there's any names that really stand out because I'm fairly certain Dubnik's going to get signed by Minnesota.
Yeah, it would be pretty silly if they don't.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think there's going to be a lot there. So I think that I don't know what they're going to do with that, honestly. That's one part that does concern me. Because obviously Steve Mason can't start every game.
Indeed.
So, what they do there. I mean, they may have to do what they did last year, which was sign Ray Emery to another 1-year deal and bring him back. I mean, who knows? But I don't see that happening. I guess I just don't know who's out there available for backup services.
Yeah, indeed. Me neither, to be honest. Do you think the Flyers will target some other players in the free agency market, like for example Joel Ward, who is likely to become a free agent this off season?
The two people I think they'll target, and I did a post about this earlier. I think it was earlier this week or maybe last week.
Yeah.
If they become available, is Matt Bolesky and Drew Stafford.
Yeah.
I think if one of those two players become available, they both can play left wing, which is a big need because we don't. I love Michael Raffle, but he should not be on the first. I don't think he should be on the first line with Drew and Voracek. I think he's a second line left winger, and he should, keep that, keep him there. We need someone that's going to be able to stick up with Drew and Voracek and is going to be able to help them out, and score with them because that was like a rotating, that was just a spinning wheel all year long because Braden Shen was there for a little bit. Wayne Simmons even was there for a little bit. Michael Raffle was there for a little bit. They kind of tried. Feels like Matt Reed was up there for a little bit. It feels like everyone's been cycled out of that spot. So they need to find someone to plug in there, and that will be able to fit and play with them. So I see them going after Matt Bolesky or Drew Stafford. Now, whether they could actually stick up with, Drew and Voracek line, I don't know. But, at least that gives some sort of depth.
Yeah, for sure. Of course, I wouldn't be that happy if Drew Stafford would leave. I really liked what he did for the Jets this season. That's my team, obviously. But we're not going to talk too much about that. One of the last things I wanted to talk about is management. The Flyers, they hired a new head coach in Dave Hextall. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe he was the head coach of the University of North Dakota. What can you tell about him? Because he's not like one of the upper echelon coaching free agents out there. What can you tell about him?
I know I said in our first podcast that I thought that Hextall was going to go off the board.
Yeah.
Just someone that no one has ever heard of, or someone that isn't well known, and that's exactly what he did. I like the signing just because it's new. It brings fresh, ideas to the organization. It brings fresh, fresh outlook on the NHL altogether. Because it feels like the NHL is just kind of a cycling of coaches. Like, all the same coaches stay up, but they just go with a different team once they're fired. So it's nice to see it's nice to see a new coach that hasn't been in the NHL, get their chance to come up. Now it is also a high risk thing because Dave Haxtell's never even played in the NHL.
Yeah.
Like he has zero NHL/AHL experience at all.
Indeed.
So it is a little risky and it's a little uncomfortable that he doesn't do that.
Hmm.
But at the same time, I like just from the limited conversations I've heard him have with, whether he's doing interviews with Philly radio shows or during the press conference, that, I like what he is about and I like what he brings. But, I guess it's a wait and see kind of thing. We got to wait and see what happens with him. So, but I like the signing when it happened.
Right. Glad to hear that. I also want to talk about Ron Hextall. You mentioned him already. What do you think of him as the GM of the Flyers?
So far, I think he's done some great moves. I I mean, let's be honest. He traded Chemo Timonen, a player who
Yeah.
who didn't play at all up during the season until the trade after the trade deadline,
Hmm.
and he traded him for a second round pick and a conditional fourth round pick, and the condition was um, the Blackhawks had to make it to the Stanley Cup. If the Blackhawks made it to the Stanley Cup final, which they did,
Hmm.
and Timonen played half of the games, which he did, um, that would turn into a second pick, so another second rounder. So now they got a second rounder this year and a second rounder next year for Chemo Timonen. I mean, that's kind of hard to believe that he did that, that he could do that. Also, with the Braden Coburn trade, just for Braden Coburn, he got a first round pick this year, a third round pick this year, and Radko Gudas.
Indeed.
So it's I can't. It's hard for me to find any complaints with what he's done so far. Um, the Nick Schultz signing, uh, it was a it was around where I thought it was going to be. I would have liked it to be a little lower. I think he's like at 2.1 million or something like that,
Hmm.
but it was for like 2 years or something like that, which is good for a third pairing defender. That's kind of what you want your depth defenseman to get paid. So, I mean, I can't really complain. A little higher than I wanted, but at the same time, it's kind of where the market is at.
Indeed.
So,
All right. Last thing I want to ask you about is the owner, Ed Snider. Correct me if I'm wrong. He's been the Flyers owners ever since they entered the NHL. He's also one
correct.
of the most the most famous owners, if you will. What can you say about him as an owner? Do you like him for the ownership, or would you like to
I
have
mean,
someone to be more hands off or more hands on?
he's very hands-on, which I like and I don't like at the same time.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of rumors around Philly that like the whole Ilya Bryzgalov signing was Ed Snider, like it was 100% Ed Snider.
Hmm.
Um, there's just rumors of stuff that he's done where you're like, okay, but at the same time, like you said, he was the guy that brought hockey to Philly, and I'm going to get a little off topic here, and I'm going to get to the expansion just real quick.
Yeah.
Like everyone says right now with Las Vegas, like, oh, Las Vegas will never work. It's
Indeed.
not a hockey town. It will never work. Well, Ed Snider was told the same thing by all the banks that he visited um, to get the loan to have the Flyers become a franchise. They were always said, oh, hockey will never work in Philadelphia. It's not. At first they thought it was soccer. They thought, like, when he first started his presentation, one of the banks said, oh, it's soccer, right? And he said, no, it's hockey. And they're like, well, hockey will never work in Philadelphia. So, it's hard to, coming from the Philadelphia area, it's hard to look at it and be like, oh, that's not going to work.
Hmm.
But he also, took what everyone said wouldn't work and made it, one of the most profitable franchises in the league. I think they're like fourth or fifth most profitable in the league.
Hmm.
So it's hard to argue with the results that he's given. Also, though, and also like even when the team's doing bad, like this year, the Flyers hit an all-time low in attendance at the Wells Fargo Center. Well, what they're not, and everyone hears that they're like, oh, you hear that with other teams and people start saying, oh, they're just bandwagon fans.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this year our all-time low is 98% is capacity for that's our all-time low.
That's a lot.
So it's
Yeah.
like so it's hard to knock on him because he has brought that love for hockey in Philadelphia. He's he has a lot of good does a lot of good charity work. Granted, he has the money to do it, and I do think, and I do agree with some people saying that NBC does kind of have a bias towards Philadelphia because you notice a lot of games on NBC and on NBCSN are Philadelphia games.
Yeah.
Well, Ed Snider's the chairman of Comcast. Comcast owns NBC, and so it's like it's one of those things where it's like I do see the whole bias part, but like I said, it helps Philadelphia's market, so I can't complain.
All right. Well, Zachary Anderson, he's the Philadelphia Flyers admin for the Hardcore NHL Facebook page. He's also known as Toothless Grin. Zach, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.